Now, of course, the wild card with the season remains what's been the wild card all along, is that the Celtics have been the number 2 offensive team, not just in the league, but in the history of the game without Jayson Tatum. So how Jayson Tatum affects the team positively or negatively when he first comes back, because that's going to be an issue, and the talk shows are going to lose their minds when Tatum comes back and the Celtics lose a game. They're going to go crazy. Oh my God, Jayson Tatum's ruining the rotations, and they trade Jayson Tatum and all this other stuff. The most important thing, I've been a big proponent of Jayson Tatum playing this year from the start, because just like everything else the Celtics have to do this year, it's about next year. I never wanted Jayson Tatum sitting this whole year out and coming back after not playing for a year and a half and starting from scratch next October. He needs to play 15 games this year, assuming he can, which I think he will. He needs to play those 15 games and know that his body won't betray him, and then he's fully ready to go come next fall.
Hoopsology brings you the voices driving basketball forward. With elite guests and sharp analysis, Matt, Justin, and Alan keep you plugged into everything hoops. From downtown, boom shakalaka.
And we were just chatting off air just about the Celtics' most recent performance at the recording of this podcast against the Denver Nuggets. Right now, as recording, the Nuggets are 23-13, third in the Eastern Conference. I know doing my predictions with my co-host, they have exceeded my expectations for this season. So what are kind of your thoughts overall in terms of how the Celtics have performed? And, despite the loss last night under, the leadership of, Brown and losing Jayson Tatum for this season, what do you think of this team, heading into the All-Star?
Well, I've been pretty resentful of this team, and here's why. Because they have forced me to say the following 3 words more than I ever have in my entire life. I was wrong, and I've been married twice. So think about how much ground that covers, and yet this team has forced me to say that repeatedly because I know there were sort of pie in the sky 45, 47 win people. I was not one of them at the start of the year. And here's why. I didn't think that Jaylen Brown wasn't capable of becoming one of the better players in the league, and that Derek White is doing Derek White things every night, and that Peyton could step into the starting lineup, or that Anthony Simons, with no fanfare whatsoever, is absolutely in the 6th man conversation right now. He's been that good. It was this. And here's the dark, seamy underbelly of the last 8 years of the Celtics that nobody talks about. When Jayson Tatum has been on the floor, the Celtics have been a 66-win team. When Jayson Tatum has been off the floor, that number is about 41 or 42 wins. They're the equivalent of a 500 team with Tatum off the floor, and that's with Hall of Fame teammates, not just Jaylen Brown and Derek White, but Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis and the championship team and Kyrie Irving and Marcus Morris and Al Horford and all those guys. This roster around Tatum this year did not look to me on paper, to anybody with any basketball eyes, to be as strong as those rosters he's played with the last 8 years. So I used that as my sort of flashpoint, that I thought between that and injury luck, which the Celtics have had certainly quite a bit of, with the exception of Tatum, obviously, throughout the course of the year, I was not someone who saw them navigating 82 games over 500. I thought they'd be near 500 team. I thought they'd play hard every night. That didn't surprise me, but nobody can tell me when you swap out Tatum, Porzingis, Horford, and Cornette for Jaylen Brown, Neemias Queta, Josh Minott, Luka Garza, Xavier Tillman, that's not an extraordinary downgrade on paper. And why would you expect the Celtics to be one of the better teams in the East? So it's been a joy to watch.
So what is the key to their success? Like, what do you attribute to them exceeding expectations?
Well, the key to their success is that there is no one key. Listen, at the start of every season, every fan of every team does the same thing in training camp. Every fan of every baseball team does the same thing in spring training. What do? You say, well, if this guy elevates to here, and this guy stays healthy, and this new shortstop can field, and we get better outfield defense, and these guys we signed as free agents give us a strong 6th and 7th, then pretty soon you're listing about 10 or 11 things, and then you hit all those, and you say, if we do all that, we could be in the playoffs in spring training. Well, the Celtics at the halfway point of the season, all of those ifs have pretty much happened. Can Derek White maintain his role as one of the better defensive guards in the league and be a shot blocker and contribute, and assist to turnover ratio stays low, and Jaylen Brown becomes one of the best players in basketball, and Anthony Simons is a 6-man candidate, and somehow Neemias Queta not becomes just a credible starting center, but maybe a top 10 starting center in the NBA, and that Joe Mazzulla push every button right with Jordan Walsh and with Minott early in the year, and Luka Garza. All of the ifs and this never happens. All the ifs have become, that stuff has really happened through the first half of the year.
So can you identify any deficiencies? And with the trade deadline coming up pretty soon here, do you think that might resolve any deficiencies that you see that might, push them over the edge towards the second half of the season, you think?
It's really an interesting dilemma, right? Because this season was supposed to be about resetting the roster and the salary issues and the tax issues and the apron issues, so that you were really not only set to go to make a run next year, but to get out of the penalties. There is a overwhelming misconception around the team that somehow they're trying to cheap their way out, or the new owner is trying to say, you're trying to get out of the constricting rules that being a repeater tax offender gets you. So it is critical to get out of the second apron, which they've done. Now, how much tax they want to pay, I just don't think anybody anticipated they'd be battling for the second spot in the Eastern Conference as we got near the trade deadline. So now you got to rethink it. I still think it's very important. Brad Stevens has got to take a 30,000-foot view here and say, what is best for the team in 27 and 28 and 29? That said, those two things might not be mutually exclusive. Upgrading, if you get a chance to get in on Zubats, who's still not 30 yet, why, you have to kick the tires on that, because it doesn't just help you this year. You can't go quick fix. Hey, maybe you can steal the East this year and get to the Eastern Conference Finals. Maybe you can. I still think, as much fun as people have had with the whole second place thing and this climb up the standings, everybody looks up. Nobody looks back. And I'd point out to every Celtic fan, because part of my job, I guess, is to have everybody not run too fast or run with scissors or go in swimming less than an hour after eating, is that if you look over your shoulder, the Celtics are just as close to 8th as they are to 1st in the Eastern Conference. Everybody's right behind you. And the Denver game underscored something else, that with the Denver game, and that's the 4th, you play 16 games against the top 8 teams in the West. The Celtics, that was just the 4th last night. They still have 12 more of those games. They're now 1-3 in those 4 games. And the one win was against the Lakers without LeBron and Luka. So the schedule will get tougher. Knock on wood with the injury luck that you've had to this point. So as someone who thought the Celtics would win 40 games at the start of the year, there's no reason to dramatically revise that prediction, because the schedule is tough and injury luck could change. Now, of course, the wild card with the season remains what's been the wild card all along, is that the Celtics have been the number 2 offensive team, not just in the league, but in the history of the game, without Jayson Tatum. So how Jayson Tatum affects the team positively or negatively when he first comes back, because that's going to be an issue, and the talk shows are going to lose their minds when Tatum comes back and the Celtics lose a game. They're going to go crazy. Oh my God, Jayson Tatum's ruining the rotations, and they trade Jayson Tatum and all this other stuff. The most important thing, I've been a big proponent of Jayson Tatum playing this year from the start, because just like everything else the Celtics have to do this year, it's about next year. I never wanted Jayson Tatum sitting this whole year out and coming back after not playing for a year and a half and starting from scratch next October. He needs to play 15 games this year, assuming he can, which I think he will. He needs to play those 15 games and know that his body won't betray him, and then he's fully ready to go come next fall.
If he does return, what does that do in terms of the fan feelings? I get the sense that maybe fans are looking through this season with rose-colored glasses, just in terms of their optimism. Am I feeling that right in terms of what they feel this team can do, and especially if Tatum comes back to the lineup, and especially in a, I think, unproven East, and it's so close. You add Tatum back into the mix, and considering their history, I think one can say that they would have a decent shot at making a run. What is your opinion of us, the fans? Are they going to be overly optimistic, you think, this season?
Well, they are wearing rose-colored, green-colored glasses right now, but you know what? They should be. Why wouldn't you be enjoying the living heck out of this? We're going to see teams coming up here over the weekend as we're talking now. We're going to see San Antonio, and the Spurs are back, and they are legit. Castle is awesome.
Yeah, they're really
Dylan's going to be great. They've done everything you need to do. But they went through, and by Spurs standards, it was a long period of time where they were just a doormat, went through 4 or 5 brutal years to get here. Oklahoma City went through 4, 5, 6 brutal years to get here. Chicago hasn't been anywhere near the playoffs. The Detroit Pistons, by the way, sitting first in the Eastern Conference. All right, this is how long I've been around and how old I am, as people often like to remind me. Cedric Maxwell was sitting next to me for Game 5 of the 2008 Eastern Conference Finals in Detroit. The series was tied at 2. Not Game 5, Game 4. Celtics were up 2-1 in the series after losing that home game, and the Pistons beat them in Game 4 of the 2008, he said, Eastern Conference Finals. And I know it happened because I was sitting right there when it happened. You know how many home playoff games the Detroit Pistons have won since then? Zero. It's been 18 years since they won a home playoff game.
Wow.
So the Celtics have done all this they had 1 year. They missed the playoffs once in 2014 in that first year, and they've been back. They've gone through none of this sort of like rebuilding process. If you can't, I think my concern about fans this year is them starting to not enjoy every second because they should, but starting to think that they're somehow entitled to get to the Eastern Conference Finals, so that it's some sort of disappointment. If this team finishes in the top 6 in the East, that's a Joe Mazzulla Coach of the Year. If they win a playoff series somehow this year, which now sounds like, oh, Grande, come on, they're third in the East. They're going to have home court in the first round. Maybe they will. If they win a first-round series, this is as overwhelming a success of a season of the 28 I've been in the league and the 25 I've been with the Celtics. If that actually happens, that would be how extraordinary this would be. And then you're kind of positioned for next year. So I hope people are not, you want to change your expectations, change your excitement about each and every night, because you could be the Indiana Pacers. Right at the start of the year, people were saying, well, the Celtics and Pacers are both going to take a gap year. And as it turns out, the only gaps here are the gap between Indiana and the second worst team in the NBA, and the gap between the Celtics and pretty much everybody else in the East.
You brought up the Pacers, and my co-host brought this up, and I want to get your opinion on this. Do you think they're tanking? And you're way more of an expert than I am. I just see, I don't think they have atrocious players, and I don't think they're just become the worst team in the league without Tyrese Halliburton. So what do you attribute to them just being at the cellar of the league and at the Eastern Conference? Is it what do you think of that?
I think that it's fair to bring it up. I think tanking is a really dicey one because it sounds good on paper. These guys, these are the best players of the best of the best of the best in the world. The worst NBA player right now is the best player. If you're ever in the room with the worst player in the NBA,
of course,
you're with one of the elite players in the world.
Agreed.
So now to get to that level, you have to understand, and I've been around these guys, obviously, I've given over half of my life now to the NBA. So I've lived around these guys. And you want to play cards with them. You want to play racquetball with them. You want to play tiddlywinks with them. They will tear your throat out to win, because that's the level of competitiveness you have to play at that level. So the notion that players are ever trying to lose games is absurd. Situations happen. There are things you can certainly manipulate with lineups and things like that, but they've had a boatload of injuries. Also, there's a psychological effect. Once you're out of it early in the year, that sort of changes the dynamic when you know what can or can't be accomplished, how you want to approach it, and who you want to play. I laughed at people, even into November, people were still talking about the Celtics. Oh, they should tank. They should still tank this season when they were like 7-7. Do you realize that was already over? When you were 7-7 and other teams are already 2-13, there's no way you were going to make up. You're not making up that gap. So, with the bottom teams in the league. So tanking it's a word I don't like because it connects to individual games, and nobody's trying to lose individual games. Now, did the Sixers keep guys out of the lineup? Did Utah give Lauri Markkanen the directions to arenas where the games weren't so he wouldn't show up for games? Did the OKC lock Al Horford out of the practice facility a few years ago so he would not help them win games? Of course, all that happens, and it's a major problem, and it's easier to get away with in the load management era, which is the biggest problem we have in the league right now, which is unprecedented financial success with all the TV deals, and we're going to be switching to streaming, and the games are on NBC, and everybody loves it. We're in the live ball era of unprecedented offense, all these things happening. The only thing that hurts my heart is when I go to a city and see little kids wearing Tatum and Brown jerseys for their only visit of the year, and the Celtics, because the schedule requires it, and they have bigger goals in mind, are sitting guys out. I'm thinking specifically of that game in Orlando at the end of last year when the Celtics had a chance to set the NBA record for best road season, and they just threw the game away. And that wasn't a tanking for lottery position. That was just rest and load management, whatever it was. But I think that's what we have to fix, because you lose. Obviously, fans always get lost the more money gets involved. But that to me, tanking isn't so much the problem as not giving the fans the players that they come to see.
Do you see that eroding the fan base over time? Especially there's rumors of maybe, new teams added to the league, that the problem continues to persist. Because I've seen that where just fans, you can't afford to maybe go, you can only afford to go to a game maybe once a year. I lived in New Mexico, so there's no NBA team. So I have friends of mine who travel to Denver, and then the Nuggets set Jokic the last minute. It's a bummer. You don't get to see one of the best players of this generation play for whatever reason. You think that might erode the fan base over time? You think that?
I think the other thing going to erode fan bases over time is as great as NBC has been, starting games at 11 o'clock Eastern time is that's not going to help anybody. You want kids to see. My son's 14, and he wants to watch Cooper Flag, but he's not going to see Cooper Flag if it's 11 p.m. on a school night. But those are the little things like that are things you need to tweak. It's hard to imagine eroding the fan base now when we're at a worldwide level of popularity.
Sure.
That is just, is unprecedented. But I think there's always things you could be aware of, be concerned of. WWE, their entire history of that particular franchise, they've had affordable tickets for families. And now the business has changed, and the guys involved there are like, no, we're going to get as much money as we can get for these are high premium events. So now you price kids out of games. That's a concern down the road. Do you price fans out? So I think there's a simple solution. I'm going to get yelled at for saying it out loud, but I think we need to be offering refunds ticket-wise when the same way if you're at the theater and they say 10 minutes before the show, the role usually played by Nathan Lane will be played today by Steve Guttenberg. I think you've got no shade. It's just a funny name to say, and it gets a good joke reaction. But you have the right in Broadway to go get your money back and go a different night. I think we need to, if we're going to continue to allow teams to sit their star players, I think that you have to do that, because it's just, again, hurts my heart when I see kids in that Orlando game and different places that we go. I know it's buyer beware, second night of a back-to-back. This week, as we're talking, the Spurs and Lakers had a big national game on ESPN. They were both on the second night of a back-to-back. On a night the Spurs don't play again, the Spurs now have 2 days off. The Celtics' next game, as we're talking, on Thursday. They played Wednesday against the Lakers, and their next game is in Boston on Saturday, but both teams played Tuesday. I think OKC had a couple of losses lately. Look at the schedule before you jump up and down. When they lost to Charlotte, they got in at 4 a.m, and they had a back-to-back against a rested Charlotte team, and things happen. That's what happens over 82 games. That's why things even out. But there's always things we can do to make the fan experience better.
Totally agree. And I think that the NBA has taken steps with that in terms of the coverage this year. The variety of different pregame and postgame shows, you get differing opinions, different interpretations of how the game should be, which are kind of filling on kind of the TV landscape this year compared to years past. We have a lot of, new interpretations. Amazon has their take. NBC, you mentioned, has their take. Of course, we have ESPN inside the NBA still around. What's kind of your feeling in terms of just how to make this covered?
Obviously, you're getting more into my field now. It's sort of my area of interest because I see fans pushing back on. Well, the game is on. Take one step back in Boston this year. The Red Sox hadn't been in the playoffs in 4 years. Their first clinching game in 4 years, happened to fall on a Friday night. So it was an Apple TV game. And needless to say, Boston, of all places, people lost their mind. Because it's Apple TV. I don't know what to do. It's Apple TV. All I would say to people who struggle with going over to Amazon Prime to watch the Thursday night football game, whatever, better get over it, because this is going to get much worse for you before it gets better. The danger in the evolution, there are always winners and there are always losers. If you have come to know and love following your team through a regional sports network and local cable, as I said earlier, my son's 14. You think he's going to have any idea what cable TV was? No, none. He won't. So the regional sports networks are in big trouble. There's going to come a time, I believe this firmly, that all the games will be in a central location. Somebody's going to wake up and realize at whoever got left out. Netflix got left out. Hulu got left out last NBA package. And somebody in one of those boardrooms is going to raise their hand and say, well, let's get some NBA games. And then somebody's going to say, we can't. All those packages are gone. And then somebody's going to meekly raise their hand in the back of the room and say, no, you know what's left? All of them. All the rest of the league pass games are left. So I believe that every NBA game is eventually going to be off regional sports networks and is going to be on some app. And you're going to get your choice of camera angles and which announcers. If you're in Boston, do you want to listen to Scal? You want to listen to me and Max? You're going to be able to, it's like the MLB TV package. You can watch the pictures you want, listen to the radio broadcast or TV broadcast or whichever team you want. And that's what's coming. And so if you're watching this on your laptop or on your phone, or you're listening to it as a podcast, you're already ahead of the game, because the people who are resistant to change, it's all going to happen. It's all going to happen really fast. And the companies, I already mentioned WWE earlier, that is always ahead of the game. The companies that make it easier for their fans, telegraph the moves, and find a way to deliver the fans the product in as many places as possible, are going to be the winners.
And I think people that complain eventually come over. I mean, the same people that complain about the games being on Peacock gets record ratings, and then they're watching it on Peacock. And they're not watch the whatever wild card game that's going to happen because it's on a streaming service. They're going to watch it. You're going to find a way to watch your team. So I think the same thing's going to happen within the NBA, despite the complaints. That's going to happen.
Yeah. Look at the obviously I've done some fights on Netflix now, and people are going to go. They're going to figure this out. And as always happened, there are people that love to listen to their big giant radio before TV, and like, I'm not getting a TV. I'm perfectly happy with what. And eventually those people get old and die out, and then there becomes TV, and then there becomes cable TV, and now there is streaming, and this is where it's going. I don't know what's next. I probably won't be around by the time whatever's after streaming happens, but it won't. You have to. When social media first became a thing, people ask me all the time, why do you do all that? There's a couple of reasons why I do all the stuff I do on social media during games, and I'll get to it if you're curious. When social media first came up, and Twitter was a thing 15 years ago, 12 years ago, whenever you think that it was starting to hit its stride, there were some guys in my position around the league that thumbed their nose at it or looked at it like, when there are dog people in the world and there's people that are not dog people. When a dog walks into the room, people who aren't dog people, they sort of recoil like, whatever. And I'll never understand how anyone doesn't want to just roll on the floor and play with a dog. So the same reaction to social media happens, and they're not going to get involved in it. Well, I never even looked at it as if, whether I like it or not, this is where the audience is. And for a long time, I've had for the years I'm just doing, just doing the audio side. Obviously, when I was doing TV and audio at the same time, you have a bigger audience. But for doing just the games with Max on the audio side, I reach a much bigger audience on social media than I do in the course of my games, because you're trying to reach fans, and there's different ways to do it. So if you're not open to it, it's evolve or die. And it doesn't matter if I was, in my 20s, or whether I'm 50, or whether I'm still doing this in 30 years when I'm 80. It doesn't matter. You have to deliver the games to the fans who, unlike target demos where you're trying to aim for women 28 to 31, you've got 8-year-olds taking in your broadcast, and you've got 80-year-olds taking in your broadcast. So you got to figure out how to reach as many of them, please as many of them, and make them enjoy the experience.
I think it's totally true. I think eventually just people do, just especially with their viewing habits, they want to go where they can, get their entertainment. And I think they progressionally do that. And I remember with social media, there's a lot of resistance. And I think eventually it's became everyday life for a lot of people, even though they're pretty unhappy with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's a dumpster fire. I used to engage, and I still like to do it. I love to engage with people. This is how we're doing this now, because I try to do a few of these podcasts less on, if I do, Bill Simmons calls me, I'll do his podcast, and he's got his monster audience, and that's great. But everybody has a different audience that covers the team, that covers the NBA. So you want to be able to, you try to say yes whenever you can, do as much of this stuff as possible. And at the beginning, I still like to engage with people, the last thing I ever wanted to do was block anybody. And now I will go on Dikembe Mutombo rants, and people don't act, I think people forget themselves, and they forget that, for example, for what I do on social media, I'm doing it for fun, for free, and to engage the audience. So if you think you can come into this living room that I've created with all these fans of our broadcast and fans of the Celtics or whatever, and just put your feet up on the coffee table and start talking smack to everybody, no, you're going to be, this isn't you're not entitled to that. So I don't mind eliminating people from the conversation that way. And you have to do it, because people, again, Celtics are going to lose a couple of games here. People are going to go, I can't believe this team. I can't stand watching this team. Are you crazy? Are you outside your mind? This team was what people picked the Knicks to win 20, 25 more games than the Celtics. And for 48 hours anyway, they were ahead of them in the standings. Does second place mean anything? No. But that was the point, because the season wasn't supposed to include any of this. So if you can't enjoy that, and it brought attention, national attention, to Jaylen in the MVP race, Joe in the Coach of the Year conversation, and hopefully Anthony Simons in the Sixth Man Award. And it's so people, when you're watching the postgame on Peacock and Isaiah Thomas up there, and it's like, hey, we got to show Joe Mazzulla and the Celtics some love for what they're doing. just like everybody should be doing the same thing for the Western Conference Celtics in Phoenix, doing the exact same thing, standing much taller than anybody thought they could. You got to enjoy that.
Absolutely. Before I let you go, any other observations this season? Any storylines that are falling under the radar that might be a factor heading into the second half of the season? Or anything that's caught your eyes so far?
I think right now, in the heat of the moment, and remember we talked about it a lot during the game on Wednesday night because we were seeing Denver, is that Drago's cut. Okay, OKC looked like they were going to walk backwards into the whole thing, and now all of a sudden, maybe not. Forget the mastery that San Antonio has over them. Look at that gauntlet. And I think the notion that the West is amazing and the East is brutal is wrong, but the elite of the elite are in the West. And then there's that next batch of teams of pretty good teams that are going to, with Boston included, with disappointing teams like Cleveland or Orlando, those teams are all going to be in the 45, 40. There are a lot of good teams in the East. But the tippy top of the West, for OKC to get to the final, I mean, no one's questioning the winner of the West is going to win the finals. But that team is going to have OKC. And look at what Denver's doing without Jokic. Wait till they get Jokic back. The Spurs, as Celtic fans are about to find out, are completely legit. And we haven't even got, and Houston decimated the Celtics early in the year. They are phenomenal, legitimate contender, legitimate chance to beat OKC in a 7-game series. And we haven't even gotten to the 2 wildcard teams, which are the Lakers and Minnesota. And by the way, I just named 6 teams that could win the West, and we haven't even talked about Steph Curry and Draymond Green. And so the top of the West is becoming very intriguing to me. And I'll give you a much more subtle one that Celtic fans will look at it through the lens of Hugo Gonzalez. But it's pretty clear when you're watching the guys who started Wednesday night for Denver. Look around the league. The volume of young players who are now able to play in the NBA, to walk in and play, is at an unprecedented level. And it's not just that you have more, a higher volume of better players. It's that kids now are coming in more NBA ready. How can I get 15 minutes in this game? If I do this one thing particularly well, it used to take guys 4 or 5 years to figure out what is it that I can do in the NBA. And guys are coming in. Maybe it's because there's a coach for every player, right? On all these teams. Exactly. That certainly helps it, but that's a minor subplot. The big one to me is that, as Lee Corso used to say with OKC, not so fast, my friend. There's some legit teams. And by the way, the Eastern Conference playoffs, you can say it's the consolation bracket if you want, but the Eastern Conference playoffs are going to be great. And one of my things the last couple of years that I've been pushing for, I've always been, all right, here's some unusual takes I always have. I don't care if anybody's with me. Overtime is too long in the NBA. 5 minutes is too long for overtime. Do some kind of Elam ending or whatever. That's always been one. Number 2 is my war against averages, scoring average, rebounding average, as opposed to totals. When everybody played 80 games, scoring average made some sense. But it doesn't in the load management era, and the 65-game rule with the voting kind of underscoring the fact that we should be looking at totals, not scoring averages. So those are like my little, kind of pet peeves I look at throughout the course of the year. There's always things you can, evolve as we go forward.
Absolutely. Sean, thank you very much for the time. Can you please let our audience know where they can find you on social media, any upcoming projects, or anything else you want our audience to be aware of?
Well, I got the same tool. I know I got to do my wife. Everybody's killing me. I got to do Instagram and all this other stuff. I've tried to start doing videos on my way to work, like walking in, doing a preview of the game because everybody likes that stuff and doing different things. But I'm still in the same place I've always been on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, Sean Grande, PBP. My project right now is we have no Netflix fights coming up in the next couple of months. So my project is, can the Celtics stay in the fight in the Eastern Conference, sitting with Max, our 25th year together. So we've been doing a lot of reminiscing about some of the highlights from the last 25 years every night, and sort of just enjoying this show. And I hope fans are. These years don't happen very often where you haven't had a chance to when people think you're going to win 65 games and win the title every year, you can't overachieve. Yeah, this team has the opportunity to overachieve. They have done it through the first half of the year. So enjoy that, because it's very possible, just like my Christmas day off this year, it's all going away when we go back to reality next year. Like if you don't think I'm going to be working somewhere on Christmas Day next year, that you're not paying attention to the league. So enjoy this year for what it is.
Really true. Sean, thank you very much for the time. Truly appreciate it. Thank you.
And that should do it for us today. On behalf of Matt, Justin, and Alan, this is Tim Kitzer saying we'll see you next time. Kaboom!